The hurricane behind me is Milton, that now has winds of 175 miles an hour. We'll talk about this Category 5 storm, where it's going, and the significant and catastrophic impacts it could bring. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back at Meteo Mundo. It is nice to see you on a Monday. This is a very special and important video that I'll be making for Hurricane Milton. Milton has bombed out to become a Category 5 hurricane in less than 24 hours from when it was a tropical storm. So we're going to give you the newest information on Milton, where it's going, what the models say, how strong it could be as it impacts portions of Florida and earlier portions of the Yucatan Peninsula as well. We're going to get right into the video. If you haven't really been keeping up, and maybe you just heard that Milton was developing in the Southwest Gulf, this time yesterday we had winds of 45 miles an hour. It is now a Category 5 hurricane with winds of 175 miles an hour and is unprecedentedly continuing to strengthen. This storm just continues to defy what we would think could be the at most strongest and quickest rapid intensification that we've seen. There's a couple of other storms that have gotten close to this, but just to see what Milton has done in the past few hours is absolutely mind-boggling. As hurricane hunters continue to investigate Milton, they just find stronger winds, they find lower pressures as well. So let me just bring the satellite data back up here. And again, let's just take a look at what's been happening with Milton. It's an absolute monster of a storm, all right? The eye is clearly defined. You have deep convection and extremely high cloud tops. I'm talking about cloud tops reaching 95 and 100 degrees Celsius, that far up in the atmosphere, where the hurricane hunters are actually reporting hail falling out of the storm. That's how vertically stacked this storm is. And it's unbelievable to think about, as of the 1 o'clock Central Daylight Time advisory here, that our winds are 175. The 11 a.m. update, I think the winds were 160 and the pressure was 925. So in a 2-hour period, we have seen the pressure drop another 14 millibars, moving east at 19, located 700 miles from Tampa, Florida. This is the latest full track from the Hurricane Center, their full advisory at 10 a.m. We'll get into the watches and warnings coming up. Now, I want to be very clear about something right here and now. No one, including me, is saying that it is going to make landfall at the west coast of Florida with 175 mile an hour winds. Thankfully, some weakening is likely, but it's still expected to be a major Category 3 hurricane at landfall late on Wednesday. And when you're talking about a starting point with winds of at least 175, and we may not be done with some additional strengthening, it can't go too much stronger, almost reaching its theoretical limits. But how much can it really weaken in a 24 to 36 hour period before landfall? This is as important and as life-threatening as a storm can be. And you need to take this very seriously if you're in the path of that. And those of you who follow the channel know I'm a pretty jolly, happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Love to have some fun on the channel, but this is serious, and we need to take it very seriously. If my tone is like that, it's because it's vitally important for those who are going to be in the direct path of this hurricane. So let's talk about, first of all, what's happening with the storm right now, because I don't want to brush over the fact that we are going to have impacts for portions of the Yucatan, from Campeche towards Merida on over towards the Cancun area, especially on the northwest side of the Yucatan, where more than likely we're going to have some hurricane conditions. Now, thankfully, the core of winds are going to miss this area to the north, but we're still going to have the opportunity for hurricane conditions on the far northwest side of the Yucatan. And if you live in this area, you need to get prepared. These are your live wind gusts out in the Merida area. Still, again, just beginning to get into the core, but this red line is a hurricane warning that is currently in effect, and the eye wall and Milton will get closer to the northern Yucatan coastline throughout the day on this Monday. So if you live in these areas, prepare for at least tropical storm conditions, but especially along the immediate coast, hurricane conditions are likely. Now, this will begin to recurve a little bit north of east in time, and will more than likely bring tropical storm conditions as far south as Cancun. Right now, places like Tulum and Cozumel are not under any kind of watch or warning, but we do have tropical storm warnings in effect as far east as Cancun and as far south as Campeche. Again, it is an absolute monster storm. Just looking at that on the infrared satellite imagery, this is what it looks like on visible satellite imagery as well. Again, it's a large hurricane. Now the eye is small, but hurricane force winds extend about 30 miles out, and we'll take a look at the advisory coming up as well. You know, the interesting thing is I got this graphic and I was like, hey guys, take a look at this. Can you believe the pressure fall on this Hurricane Hunter recon data down to 924? Look at that. No, it's 911 already, just like that. It dropped another 13 millibars from about an hour and a half ago when I grabbed this graphic. It's absolutely unbelievable how deep this storm is actually bombing out right now. All right, so now let's talk about the path as we move forward, okay? And again, we need to take this as seriously as we've ever taken a storm along the west coast of Florida. Let's talk about what the forecast is to be. Remaining a Category 5 through at least late tomorrow, okay? What we're hoping for, and I'll show you this, is this storm should begin to encounter some wind shear within the 24 to at most 36-hour window as it moves closer to the west coast of Florida. So it is forecast to get back down to a Category 4 and then eventually make landfall as a Category 3 with winds of around 130 miles an hour. But I want to be clear, that is still a major Category 3 hurricane that could bring destructive or catastrophic storm surge, rainfall, flooding, and wind damage with power outages that could be extremely widespread throughout Florida. Not just the coastline, but the rainfall, the power outages, the wind damage could all be extremely excessive with this storm as it moves quickly through the state, and that means that wind field is going to stay strong. And the other problem with a hurricane that's encountering shear is, sure, you might knock down the strongest core of winds at the eye, but that wind field actually expands some as it fights that shear. And so you could actually have hurricane force winds extend farther out in the eye because of the wind shear that's going to encounter. And the storm surge that could be coming along with it might be at its maximum. Just because it goes from a Cat 5 to a Cat 3 before landfall, whatever dome of water it has built up at its maximum, it's generally going to be carrying along. You don't see a big dispersal of that storm surge. And we'll look at the storm surge forecast in effect for these areas right now. But again, the impacts that this could bring is very significant. Let's talk about the actual track from the Hurricane Center. It has slightly shifted back farther north, right? This time yesterday, it was over the Sarasota County area. Now it's right back over Tampa Bay. This would be a very, very bad track for the Tampa Bay area, Pinellas, Hillsborough counties, and then inland, including the Metro Orlando area, because basically the core of the winds would go right up the I-4 corridor. That being said, if you look at the cone of uncertainty, we are still talking about from the Nature Coast and the far southern side of the Big Bend all the way down towards Cape Coral. When I show you the spaghetti plot models, these are our tropical forecast models, I do want you to note the vast majority of them are actually on the southern side of where the center line is from the Hurricane Center. Now, again, we don't look at the center line very often because the impacts are going to be felt so widespread, but this is impactful for where the max winds are going to be and where the highest storm surge is. And although most of the individual models are south of this line, when you average out all of the models and all of the ensembles throughout the globals, the GFS and the European model and some of the other models that come into play, the consensus is actually this line or even slightly north. And that's why the Hurricane Center has moved this slightly north as well. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm going to show you models that go up and down this line. There is still not an extreme consensus as to where exactly landfall will be. That's why if you live within this cone, you need to be paying very, very close attention to this. As far as timing goes, it's slowed up a little bit, okay? So now we're looking at, for Florida and then the Bahamas, deeper into Wednesday and then Thursday. So the arrival of the tropical storm force winds begin to develop early on Wednesday morning. Things will just get worse and worse throughout Wednesday. And again, we'll look at the landfall on the models late Wednesday, maybe even early on Thursday, and then obviously some of the significant winds spread into the northwest Bahamas late Wednesday, then throughout the day on Thursday as well. We're not expecting hurricane conditions in the northwest Bahamas, but tropical storm force conditions are possible. Now, when we start to talk about how this is going to end up moving, okay, let's look at two of the big factors that are going to steer Milton in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. You have this ridge of high pressure that's developing over Cuba and the Bahamas and building off towards the east. But you notice the clockwise winds around it are going to butt up against Milton, and Milton cannot go due east for the entire time. It has to go north and east around the periphery of this area of high pressure. You also have a shortwave trough digging into the southeast of the Mississippi River Valley, and depending on the strength and the location of that, it could pick up Milton and drag it north. Most of the models, including the GFS that has the storm farther north, has a stronger feature with this shortwave, which would pick up the storm. And remember, I'm showing you upper level steering winds at 250 millibars. You need an extremely vertically stacked storm to be influenced by winds that high in the atmosphere. Well, that's exactly what we have. Milton is about as vertically stacked as a storm is ever going to get. And even as it weakens a bit in the eastern Gulf, it's still going to be certainly vertically profiled enough to be influenced by steering currents this high up in the atmosphere. So believe it or not, this graphic is extremely important, and where these features ultimately end up being as Milton makes its way into the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico throughout Wednesday. It's extremely important. Let's look at the GFS model. Now, I want to be clear about one thing. Ignore the pressures. Only one model has initialized Milton any close to where the actual pressure is right now. Remember, it's 9/11 pressure as we speak. All right, this is more about let's talk location and timing. This is the newest run of the GFS model. This would be the wee hours of Thursday morning, just past midnight Wednesday. Has landfall north of Tampa Bay, maybe somewhere in Pasco or Hernando County, again, as a major hurricane, right? That track going north and east. But again, this is one of the global models that is north of where the center line track is. And again, the timing is early Thursday. Here's the European deterministic model as well. It's basically right through Tampa Bay, right? And then I wanted to extend this out to show you that on the European model, and we're going to really slow this up. And again, pressure's way too high. It will weaken a bit. That's what we're crossing our fingers for. But again, kind of almost ignoring the pressure and talking about track more than anything on these deterministic models right now. That would be moving through early Thursday morning. So even later than the GFS, right through the Metro Orlando area off the Brevard County coastline. All right. Now the HAFS A, I'm going to take myself off camera, is the only model that's really initialized with anywhere near how strong Milton actually is. It initialized with winds of 151 miles an hour. It maxes Milton out with winds of 185. All right, now again, that's in the open waters of the south central Gulf of Mexico. As it moves on shore, if you look in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, that's the max sustained winds. We get down to about 130 by landfall, and in that last frame, the eye is actually inland, but I just wanted to show you where it's going to go, and that would be winds of 100 miles an hour. And again, that track is near the European model and where the center line is from the hurricane center and near Tampa Bay. And again, that would be early on Thursday. HWRF model, this is still offshore, and this is going to be 5 a.m. on Thursday. It's slightly weaker with winds of 122 as a max, right? But what an awful track for Tampa Bay. Anywhere near the bay or north, the storm surge on the south side is going to be amplified, right? So this is still a dire track for Tampa Bay as far as water inundation goes. And again, inland, we should expect there to be hurricane force conditions to come along with the storm, even if we're going to say right now, we're talking about a category 3, all right? There's still a lot of play in just how much this weekends. I hope somehow, some way it falls apart. But again, when we're talking about a storm that could be 175, it's going to be very hard to kind of see that happening. Let's talk about the European AI model real quick. Again, it's one of the farthest south tracks. It's, again, early Thursday morning. This would be more south of Tampa Bay, back into places like Sarasota, and even a little bit closer to Port Charlotte. And again, the AI model of the European, sorry about that, did fairly well with Helene, so showing you that. I'm just giving you guys all the information. I want you to notice again, up and down the West Coast, there's still a fair amount of question marks, okay? So again, we have hurricane warnings up in these areas. Let's take a look at the actual advisory here for Milton. Again, if you guys are new to the channel, I can actually pull the advisory from the Hurricane Center right on screen here, and we can kind of look at it together. So let me get the wind profile off. Again, it's just unbelievable. Milton explosively intensifies with 175 mile an hour winds, reading it right from here. We've already gone over the information as far as that goes. So the hurricane watches are currently in effect from Chakaluski to the mouth of the Swanee, including Tampa Bay, the Dry Tortugas, Lake Okeechobee, okay? This is going to become a hurricane warning soon. It's just a timing thing. We got to get it within 48 hours. We've got the storm surge watch. We've got the tropical storm warning. We've got the tropical storm watch in effect for the Flamingo area to Chakaluski, the northern Gulf Coast from the Swanee to Indian Pass, the lower, middle, and the upper Florida Keys, including Florida Bay, okay? So that's what's currently happening as far as watches and warnings in this area. Now, when we take a look at some of the models as far as rain, let's do that with the GFS. So let me load that up and put it into motion, and we'll talk about the timing of that and then some of the wind fields as well. Again, there's a few messages I'm going to pass along, but I'll just say it right now. If you're in an evacuation zone and you're told to evacuate, you got to evacuate. You can't play around with this storm, okay? The wind is going to be a significant thing. The rainfall is also going to be a significant impact as well. As far as timing with this goes, we're going to get some showers redeveloping across Florida later today. As we get into Tuesday, again, we can have some breaks in the action before the main show comes in, and that will start early on Wednesday morning, where we could start to see some tropical storm conditions encountering the West Coast right around daybreak. And then you can just see on the GFS beginning to move up towards Tampa Bay as we go throughout the day on Wednesday and then overnight into Thursday. Now, I know it doesn't look extremely impressive where we see this huge tight eye coming in on the GFS model here, but again, the wind profile field is going to be very significant near that core. And it's going to come along with a severe weather threat. We're going to have some rotating storms and tornadoes. Official forecast is 5 to 10 inches of rain, but locally higher amounts. And we'll look at those potential rainfall totals coming up as well. But you're going to want to have your hurricane preps done by tomorrow morning, and you're going to be wanting to shelter in place by Tuesday night, because this storm will begin to impact the area quickly on Wednesday and then just carry through Thursday and potentially even through Thursday afternoon, depending on if it slows up even a little bit more. Now, for our friends of the Bahamas, and I know that there's this yellow area, guys. It's a new one from the Hurricane Center. It's not a huge deal. I'll keep an eye on it for Bermuda, but just to say that I'm not concerned about it, there's a broad spin over the Bahamas right now, moving off towards the east. It's not going to develop over the Bahamas. But for the Bahamas, again, we are going to pick up some gusty winds, some potential tropical storm force conditions. That would begin later on Wednesday, then throughout the day on Thursday. But with this slightly farther north track, right, especially on the GFS, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, you're not going to see the impacts as significant here for the Bahamas, but for Walker's Key and Grand Bahama and Bimini and the Abacos, you should prepare for the potential for some tropical storm conditions in your area. And the Bahamas Department of Meteorology will keep you updated. I will here, of course, at Meteo Mundo, but you can check in and get the latest information from them as well. Let me go over to the wind profile field with this, and let's loop it up. And again, this is the newest deterministic model of the GFS. First of all, let's look at the track of the core winds, kind of up that center line. Let me bring back on the cone. Let's see here. There it is, perfect. All right, so let's take a look at this on the GFS. And again, the time is on the top left-hand side of your screen. So as we get into Wednesday evening, now we start to see this move in. And on the forecast from the GFS, just north of Tampa Bay, probably into Pasco County, right? So some of the areas that could be directly more impacted would be Tarpon Springs and Clearwater and Newport Richey, maybe up towards the Hudson area, Spring Hill. But again, just one model. We don't want to focus, but we're talking about winds. And these are sustained winds, by the way. These are not gusts. Let's bring up my query tool. You can still see that we have major hurricane force winds. The GFS is slightly weaker, and we would want to see that. But this is still a core storm with significant surge impacts and wind impacts for the West Coast. All right? We need to take this extremely, extremely seriously. When I switch over to the HRRR model, which is our high resolution, I can't go out too far in time. Unfortunately, it's only a 48-hour model. But just to kind of give you guys an idea of what a very high resolution model is doing, we'll let it kind of loop up here in a second. It'll take just a little bit of time to get all the way. Unfortunately, it's only going to go until Wednesday morning because the model initialized this morning. You go 48 hours out, you're now into Wednesday morning. But just to show you that there's going to be some significant wind fields developing ahead of this as well. It's going to be very blustery even on Tuesday and especially early on Wednesday morning here. And now we're going to start to see the storm begin to come up. Again, this is a model that's domain is basically the continental United States. It does include the northwest side of the Bahamas as well. But I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what some of the higher resolution model data is trying to bring. So this is, again, this is early. Let's see here. Let this keep looping up. There we go. A lot of data with these high resolution models, so it's going to take a little bit of time. But just on the HRRR, I'll pause it here at the end. You can see that it's basically following the center line track. And you're going to have some, again, Cat 3 winds within this. But let's hope that there's that weakening that continues. Now for the Bahamas, again, out that far, 15, 20 mile an hour winds to start with, but the wind gusts will be picking up higher than that as well, of course. This is a graphic that I need you guys to take as seriously as you possibly can. And I'm going to be honest, based on the fact that this is from the 10 a.m. advisory and now we have a 175 mile an hour hurricane, it's not going to surprise me if these numbers go up from the potential peak storm surge. You have a peak storm surge possible as far into the Panhandle as Indian Pass to the Swanee River, 1 to 3 feet. Obviously, those areas had been impacted by Helene. Let's hope that they don't get any more than that. Down to Yankeetown, it's 3 to 5. Yankeetown to Anclote River, it's 5 to 10. Right now, the official forecast for Tampa Bay, all of the Tampa Bay area, is an 8 to 12 foot storm surge. That is significant. Dare I say, in some areas, that could be catastrophic. And again, I am quite concerned that those numbers may be raised as a higher potential based on the fact of where Milton is right now. Charlotte Harbor area is 5 to 10. That is significant storm surge as well. And again, all the way down to the Chokoloskee area, you're looking at 4 to 7, 2 to 4 to Flamingo, and then 1 to 3 for the Florida Keys and Dry Tortuga. As I mentioned, the eye, where it passes and south, is your worst storm surge. On the north side, you get winds of a northeast direction going offshore, which kind of go against where we could have the actual storm movement, okay? So anywhere north won't have the peak storm surge, along the eye and south will. These are the wave heights from the model. They're gonna be offshore waves. I wanna be clear, these aren't the waves coming actually onshore, but bottom right-hand side of your screen, wave height maximum, that's over 30 feet, guys. Huge swells, huge swells coming up the Florida Gulf Coast. Those swells will then pick up across the Atlantic waters as well. So the east coast of Florida, Georgia, and portions of South Carolina, and then back into the northwest Bahamas. Late Thursday, Friday, we will more than likely have double-digit swells in the exposed waters of the Atlantic. So for boaters in the Bahamas, this is going to really elevate the seas as it passes by north of you. And again, on the official forecast from the Hurricane Center right now. But some extremely high waves are going to be coming along with this storm. So let's talk preparations, okay? Again, we're as serious as we can possibly be right now. Hurricane prep should be finalized tomorrow morning. Know if you're in an evacuation zone. That's the very first thing. And if you're ordered to evacuate, please evacuate, okay? They're not going to be able to come in and rescue you when you're talking about the potential catastrophic impacts that we could see with the storm surge and the flooding and the trees knocking down power as well. That's the other thing. You have to prepare for the possibility to be without power for several days. I stated it yesterday, but the rain Florida saw yesterday in my area got about 3 inches, has already saturated the soil. We have very large, beautiful oak trees, but they do not have deep roots. They're more shallow and spread out. And so these kinds of winds can really knock down some larger trees, and that's going to take down some power lines as well. And this is well inland. This is not just the coast, but even along the East Coast should prepare for the opportunity or the potential to be without power for several days. Now, I will be obviously giving updates here at Meteo Mundo, but I'll be giving plenty of updates over on the other channel, our sister channel, Central Florida Weather Live, because this will be impacting Central Florida. So if you would like to follow there, you will find the link in the description below on this channel, on this video, but you can also just go to the YouTube search at Central Florida Weather Live. look for that logo, and I appreciate you guys subscribing. Thank you for doing that as well right now with this video. Thank you for liking and sharing this with anyone that you think might get something out of it. So let's talk about a few other hazards here again. The first thing I want to do actually, and we're going to look at the rainfall potential as well. I'm going to go back over to the GFS and go back up to the winds here and then take this out a few days back to the impacts of this storm. And the biggest reason why is I just want to talk about the potential wind impacts it could bring inland. Now, there is an opportunity, and I just really think the GFS model is it's not really picking up on how much wind the Metro Orlando area could see. But there is absolutely the opportunity of some near sustained hurricane force winds, especially on the southwest and the western sides of the metro, Lake County, southwest Orange County, northern Polk, northwest Osceola counties. Very strong winds are obviously possible on the coastline in the GFS model as well, hurricane force or above. And again, on this projected path, and the fact that we're only going to be getting about 50 miles inland from the storm in Orlando, we should expect to still see some hurricane force winds if it comes in as a Category 3. When it comes to storm surge, let's take a look at the wind vectors, and we can look at the gusts as well. Loop this up. Again, I've showed you this graphic the last several days as well. This is just to give you an idea of where the wind direction is headed so you guys understand what I'm talking about when we need to worry about the areas with the highest potential for the greatest storm surge. So let me just make these a little bit bigger so you guys can see, space them out just a little bit more as well. Okay, so when we're looking at the GFS model, winds start offshore, we get that. But then as the storm comes in, right, counterclockwise winds. Anywhere along the center path and south will have the onshore winds, and the orientation of both Charlotte Harbor and Tampa Bay are absolutely horrible. They're open on the southwest side, and that's exactly the wind flow. Look at those turn of winds on the GFS right there. That's where you get the double-digit storm surge, even up to 10 feet in Port Charlotte, but really for Tampa Bay, that's the problem. That turn of winds right there as the eye moves near or north of you on the GFS. For the nature coast, you would stay with the northeast winds. You would have storm surge and water inundation, but it wouldn't be as significant. So again, farther north track pulls more of the northern coast into play for the stronger and higher storm surge. If it were to track farther south of Tampa Bay, then Tampa Bay gets a reprieve from the highest storm surge in its areas farther south, like Port Charlotte and the Cape Coral area and the Naples area, that could potentially have the higher storm surge, all right? So that is where the eye actually coming inland is of vital importance for the storm surge water inundation. Looking at peak wind gusts, and I'm just going to take this out. I think the easiest thing to do is just to bring this out to, let's do early on Thursday morning. Well, the GFS is already offshore by then, so, well, because I had 5 p.m. Sorry about that. Let's bring this back to early, let's see, still wrong, Rusty. I'll get it eventually. Here we go. So these are going to be your peak storm surge winds. I'm sorry, your peak winds, your wind gusts. Again, just going to take off the wind fields here, and we can query these. So this is the idea that I wanted to get into the Metro Orlando area. That on the GFS model, we have peak winds here of over 80 miles an hour in gusts early on Thursday morning. Okay? That's the significant winds that could be coming into the Metro Orlando area. If you live in the Orlando metro area, you need to prep and prepare based on this track to have hurricane force gusts, not sustained, but winds that could be gusting over 80 miles an hour coming through early on Thursday. And if I step this out, and we'll see, because it's, let's see here, it's not the, I do have the 8 a.m. You can see that some of the higher winds will make the East Coast as well. All right. Maybe not right at hurricane, but really close for portions of Volusia and Brevard. And if I take it one step back from there to, let's say, about 11 p.m., you can clearly see what the GFS is doing with wind gusts here in Tampa Bay. And again, it's probably underdoing it a little bit, but you get the idea that triple-digit winds are likely in Hillsborough and Pinellas County, maybe portions of Manatee, Sarasota, and Pasco counties as well. Friends, that's the situation. This is quickly evolving. I promise you I'm going to keep you updated on a regular basis with these videos, We'll be going live on Central Florida Weather Live, and I will be going live here in Meteo Mundo. I'll have more about our coverage plans coming up with the next video, but we'll be doing a lot of coverage for you here. Do me a quick favor. Find us across all social media, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. You want to send me a picture or video, myMediaMundo@gmail.com. Specific question about the forecast. I hope I answered it, but you can drop it in the comment section below. And again, while you're down there, thank you so much for liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Friends, if you are in the path of this storm, please take this extremely, extremely seriously. If you're told to evacuate, get out of harm's way. I'll be back very soon with the latest. Until then, please take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you soon right here at Meteo Mundo.